Hey, what's up, everybody? I wanted to share something that's been kind of on my radar recently, and I just love telling a platform, whoever it is, um, whatever I can generate, because I understand that this video is going to go on my channel where it's going to exist for months, years, decades, and I wanted to talk about things that haven't been discovered yet. And today I found definitely one of those things that more people should know about. So let's just get right into it. This person, Michael Levin, is an academic with 635 subscribers as of today, but I think he's going to blow up and be well known. If he isn't, he should be. I just want to go over what I've seen from him and his channel. It's this individual right here. I don't know very much about him, but I know that the work he's doing is really interesting. As I understand it for now, Michael Levin works on what happens with organic biology and the direction that things go into. Another way to say that is when you have to heal something or repair something, what is the information encoded within the genetics, within the cells that causes that biological organism to progress forward? And so he's looking at the underlying aspects of all that. His work gets into biology, consciousness, physics, fundamental physics. And so he gets lots of other people and has conversations with them about these topics, and they get really complicated, really in depth. It's totally out of my, limits of understanding, but that's where I like to be. If I'm in, if you're in a room and you're the smartest person in the room, you got to find yourself another room. And I've done that in my life or whatever. Just kind of like, okay, I'm not here. I got to go on the pursuit of something I don't understand in order to enhance my own worldview. So what does that mean practically? Practically speaking, the work that Ian McGilchrist has done with his famous book, The Master and His Emissary. This is such a good book. I got it on Audible. It talks about the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, the different hemispheres. Oh, that's from Making Sense. Interesting. And it just, the first half of that book is about the biology and how the right hemisphere is totally separate from the left hemisphere and why they both are almost like separate people that work together. And in the second half of this book, he talks about the cultural impact of it. So the making of the Western world. So he goes over the history of things. And so this changed my worldview. I mean, it just changed how, okay, if I'm explaining something, I've got to set it in the right context and then find the words. So the right brain is sort of the creative. It takes the unknown in. It sets the context. The left side of the left hemisphere of the brain is sort of controls the right hand. It's grasping. It's finding the words. It's putting language. It's fitting something into a known context. Not known context. It's fitting something into something that's known. And then those two working together, it develops your perception of the world. So that's how I first found is through this conversation right here, where Michael Levin talks about his work and Dr. Ian McGilchrist talks about his work. And it's funny, I think he spelled Ian's name wrong because his name is okay, so I have it wrong in a couple of my videos. Whatever, that's not relevant. I found this randomly, and it just like was so interesting to me.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me.
This I don't know who this person is, but this talk was like fascinating. It's information dynamics in living systems. So this person, it's a 32-minute long lecture. And I'm not sure why Michael Levin must know him or something. This guy is Bob Gattenby integrated mathematical oncology department at the Moffitt Cancer Center. He, opens this video saying, even though he's at the oncology department, this is not totally just related to cancer. It involves how is the information within cells, how is that unlocked and how does it transfer? Let me scrub through a little bit. How is genetic information converted to the novel thermodynamic state of living systems? Are the information dynamics in living systems limited to heritable information in the genome? As you guys may know, I read a book called, it's sitting over there, I don't need to go get it, The Gene, which is sort of a history of everything we know from the past couple hundred years of how genetics. So I recommend you go, watch my summarization of that book. And then, of course, I recommend reading the book if you're interested in the topics. But there's kind of, in 2023, we're at a limit of our understanding of genetics. We have cracked the code insofar that we can analyze with, microscopes and kind of, we could code out the human genome. So we know all the chromosomes, we know how they line up, and we know how, sperm has one half, egg has the other half, they meet together, and then how they sort of form and complement each other. But how is that information contained within them? And then how does that get out and sort of create something bigger than itself using that energy conversion? And if you really understand that, then that could change. You're kind of unlocking. There wouldn't be a need for the typical kind of inefficient biological process that we have now to create more humans. If you unlocked the information potential that's within these cells, you could, you could do anything. You could repair, someone loses a hand, you could grow it back and surgically attach it. You can genetically code for, exactly the right attributes to make a super athlete from the time they're a baby. So all this stuff is sort of contained within genetics, and that's why it's interesting. And as far as I'm understanding, this is sort of the most up-to-date level that we're at in terms of information and genetics. I hope I'm making sense here. This is even beyond my own understanding of all this. Okay, the third point here is how is information transmitted? Is the current concept of cytoplasmic diffusion of signaling molecules complete? To be honest, I don't really know what that means.
Well, again, a unique property of living.
We don't. I do recommend you go back and listen to this guy's lecture, but I just wanted to point out why this caught my attention. I want to understand what he was saying. So Crick and Watson were the people that discovered, they were the father of genetics, sort of in the early 1900s. They sort of pointed to DNA. So biological information is transferred from DNA to RNAs to proteins. So once the information is passed into the protein, it cannot get out. So you have DNA that goes into RNA, that goes into protein. DNA replicates, gets transcription into RNA, which translates into protein. We've heard a lot about this with mRNA vaccines. All information is in the genome and nucleus is the cell's command center. So the nucleus is the control center of the cell, and it contains DNA. It's called the brain because it holds the information needed to conduct most of the cell's functions. Okay, this is kind of stuff that we already know. He says standard biology is all about genes. genetic networks act as central processes that receives, analyze, and then directs responses to intrinsic and extrinsic signals. So what this is kind of expressing is that there's lots of complicated interactions between different genes and how they interact with this signals everything in life. So every thought you've ever had, every action that your biological body takes, like you're hungry, so you go towards food, or you have like desires which make people go out and socialize with each other in order to achieve a goal. And so all of that can be reduced down to genetics. So if you really understand how the information is locked within those cells and how it actually is directed, you'll learn so much more about the human condition, and just unlocks so much. The potential is, unlimited. Okay, let's keep going. He talks about, the specifics, and I learned a lot here. How is information physically transmitted? He talks about the standard model and then what his work is sort of building upon. The standard biological model is random thermal motion accounts for protein movement and interaction within the nucleus and cytoplasm are essentially random. Okay? So he says that all models like this are sort of a reduction because the scale is not correct. He has this picture just to point out that it's complicated, that there's a lot going on, but this still is a simplified view. So, he talks about gene expression. He does not get into details on this. I've watched this whole thing, and again, we're only like 3 minutes in, so I'm sort of mindful that I want to keep going with this. In fact, let's just keep going. But talks about that. Oh, this is his hypothesis. Diffusion is inefficient and wasteful of time and energy. Is this the best evolutionary optimization can do? So he's sort of saying the standard biological model is that random motion accounts for protein movements, and then they interact with the nucleus, and all of those things are random. But if you could understand them so that they're not random and you could predict them and manipulate them, then you can optimize evolution. So that's very exciting. If you could understand all this randomness and make it work for you, that'd be a good thing. That's kind of the future of humanity. He talks about one example is sort of, this is a very simplified model of, and I don't know who his audience is, but it's probably like very intelligent people that understand this better than I do. He says, you've all recognized this process. This is a simplified version. All of these things happen, gene transcription. I don't know what these things are, but he says even this model is wrong because each of these is not to scale, and the distance they have to travel is much farther. Like, these individual components are tiny, tiny, tiny compared to the vast distance that they have to go in order to be transcripted. And so he just says, if you just understand this one signaling pathway, it shows how much we don't understand with the actual process of it. So the transduction requires at least 5 steps, none of which have a clear physical mechanism. Okay? I think he's pointing out what we don't know. He said common depictions are not drawn to scale. The image is 4 protein diameters. In reality, it's 1,000 protein diameters. So yeah, this is not to scale. Relative protein availability is also ignored. So I don't know what that means, but okay. This was an interesting, I don't know if I can summarize this thought, but he basically says the 3-dimensional diffusion problem is, this quote might help. A drunk man will find his way home, but a drunk bird may get lost forever. So what that means is on a 2D space, if a protein has to go out and find something, it's likely to do it, even if it's random. But if it's in a 3D space, that protein finding the correct place to go in a 3D space is just much more random and variable. And that's what we lose here, is that we tend to graph things onto a 2D space to understand it, and that's not correct. So if we can take into account the fact that this protein could go anywhere in 3D space, that would be a good thing. Yeah. So he says the fact is, only in perfect cases where every random movement is in the same direction can these claims be made. Unfortunately, due to the isotropic nature of thermal motion, this scenario will never truly occur. Okay? Let's see. What does he talk about here? Information in the genome is commonly calculated as Shannon information. Shannon information is the nucleotide sequence of a gene produced the low entropy far from equilibrium, blah, 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 blah. He's kind of making the point here that if you take a sentence of 100 letters from a newspaper, so he's talking about information and transferring information. If you take a piece of Shakespeare or a theorem of Einstein and you just take 100 letters, the same information is being transferred. Even though they're trying to say different things, like Shakespeare is very different from Einstein, the words themselves are transferring the same information. So there's context that's missing upon the transfer of information. And if you could line those up so that the piece of Shakespeare actually says what Shakespeare wants, the tragedy or the comedy of a play, and tells about the human experience, versus Einstein, which is writing something that's scientific in nature and kind of unlocks the theories of gravity or quantum physics or things like that. The words themselves come across as just, okay, this is 100 letters, they're the same. We're missing so much of that. And that's the problem with information in the genome. And I believe this refers to Shannon information. Okay, consider the critical role of chemical reactions in living systems. Talks about non-biological systems. I won't go through this whole video. And this gets into stuff where he talks about how information is finally encoded and how it changes and then leaves the enzyme. And how information reacts to thermodynamics. And this is interesting because it takes the fields of sort of cognitive science of information, because information's a nebulous, like, abstract concept, into thermodynamics, which is physics. It's the realm of the concrete. So you have, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the abstract makes it into concrete. And the abstract is sort of the potential of what information can be. So this is exciting to me. This is where, if you can manipulate this, you can make a huge difference. This is kind of the future of humanity. Okay, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. I did want to point out one extra thing on here. It's worth asking if all biological information is actually in the genome. He kind of points out that the human genome is 19,000 genes, which is fewer than mice and worms. So even though humans are the most complicated beings that we know about, literally the brain or like the eye is more complicated than anything else in the observable universe. We can observe how a planet interacts, or a moon, or Jupiter, or things like, or a sun, or a black hole. but none of those systems are more complicated than just the cells and the biology of a human being. And even then, humans have fewer genes than like mice and worms. So just because there's more genes in a less complicated creature doesn't mean that that creature is more complicated. You see what I'm saying? But the thing I wanted to show you is, so they're trying to find where the extra information is. This part, Maxwell's Demon. So this is an interesting concept. I wasn't aware of this. I'm going to try to explain this. Maxwell's Demon, on the left side and the right side. So you have a system, okay? There's high energy states and low energy states. High energy tends to be molecules that are heated, that are high energy, and then low energy is sort of cooler, and those things are constantly interacting. What biology is taking concentrated high energy states, translating them into a component that's mass, but keeping the information in the high energy state, and then converting it to like energy that works towards something. So, when you eat a piece of food, your body changes that energy into, it takes the mass, the energy, the stuff that's unlocked in that, the calories, and converts it to energy that fuels the body. And there's a mysterious process that scientists have just labeled Maxwell's Demon, because this guy wrote a paper about it that said there's something that we don't understand that opens the door and closes the door and separates energy into high energy states and low energy states. The thing that's opening and closing this door and sorting out and creating things, it's kind of a mysterious process. And if you can find what Maxwell's Demon is, if you could find the process that's doing that, then you can learn more about it. So that's the mystery of biology. We don't know how things work. We don't know how genes are encoded exactly. We do know things about it, but we don't know like what Maxwell's Demon is. Okay. Let's get into more stuff. I think we'll call it at that. But this is all to say, this was my first video. And I was like, what does this have to do with Michael Levin? Well, Michael Levin's work is about everything I've been describing. You should watch this video if you're interested. This video is really interesting because he takes a neuroscientist who talks a lot about consciousness from South Africa and talks to a physicist who's trying to understand how quantum physics with our understanding that the observer perceives the observed and has an effect on it. And the implications of that are crazy because in classical physics, prior to 1924, before quantum physics, we thought that the world and the universe existed out there. And if you observe it, you don't have any effect on it. You're just watching the world operate, kind of a mechanical thing, right? As it turns out with quantum physics, the observer has a direct effect on the observed, and those are just closely related. We don't know what that means. We don't know why that is what it is. And so there's a lot of work to be done with that, and they talk about that more. In the interest of time, I'm going to leave it there. I've said a lot of things. I just think it's amazing that content like this is freely available. It's got 131 views. Even the most popular video has 5.6 thousand. It's still nothing. And then this guy has hardly any subscribers. So I just recommend his content. Okay. Leave me a comment. Ask me some questions. Let's talk about this. Hopefully you guys are as interested in this as I am. And if you're not, why did you watch all the way to this part of the video? All right. I'll talk to you guys another time.